It's Monday, August 23rd, 1999. Dr. Deborah Asnes calls the New York City Health Department to report 2 cases of encephalitis in elderly residents of Flushing and Queens. By the end of September, New York City would tally 63 confirmed cases of this encephalitis, with 59 hospitalizations and 7 deaths. Identification of the cause of this outbreak would involve epidemiologists, veterinarians, virologists from multiple countries, average citizens, and even an international goose smuggler. Today, West Nile virus is one of the most common causes of infectious encephalitis in the United States. Since the original outbreak in New York City, there have been about 30,000 hospitalizations and 3,000 deaths from West Nile virus, most occurring in July, August, and September. Back in early August 1999, Tracy McNamara, the head pathologist at the Bronx Zoo, was noticing dead crows and other dead birds accumulating in high numbers. Her calls to the CDC were deflected to veterinary organizations, but they were more interested in economically impactful animals such as cattle. By August 19th, Wart Stone of New York's pathology unit informed McNamara that he could find no common thread amongst the dead birds. The canary in the coal mine had died, and no one had raised the alarm. Thus, when people started being hospitalized with severe encephalitis in late August, physicians were at a loss. The patient's brain inflammation was accompanied by fever, headaches, gastrointestinal issues, and most worryingly, flaccid paralysis that required ventilation. Notably, patients did not exhibit neck stiffness, an indicator of meningitis. Now, New York City usually reports about 10 cases of encephalitis without meningitis annually, but 4 cases had been reported in only a few days, so a novel situation seemed to be emerging. What could be causing this outbreak? The lack of a descending pattern to the paralysis, as well as the presence of lymphocytes and high protein levels in cerebrospinal fluid, ruled out botulism and strongly pointed to a viral agent. Enteroviruses are the most common cause of encephalitis, but in such infections, meningitis is commonly found. Additionally, enterovirus-associated disease is most common in infants and children, whereas the patients in this new outbreak were all elderly. But interestingly, all the patients spent a good deal of time outdoors, suggesting an arthropod vector, maybe a mosquito. Soon, St. Louis encephalitis, SLE, was brought to the attention of New York City epidemiologist Dr. Annie Fine by her fiancé. This virus is classified as a flavivirus. It is enveloped and has a single-stranded RNA genome. SLE can cause severe disease, including encephalitis and difficulty in breathing. Its natural hosts are birds, which are unaffected by the virus, and it is transmitted by mosquitoes of the genus Culex. It is exceedingly rare in New York State and has never been documented in New York City. But for investigators who were unaware of the bird die-offs, this was their best target. It only took until Friday, August 27th, 4 days after the first reports, that New York State and the CDC demonstrated that the patients had antibodies that bound SLE. Although these tests were preliminary, it was sufficient for Mayor Rudy Giuliani to advise citizens of New York City to wear bug spray and to avoid being outside during prime biting hours. Additionally, New Yorkers should eliminate sources of standing water where mosquitoes breed, and the city would spray malathion. But a couple of citizens got Dr. Fine and her boss, Dr. Layton, thinking. Just prior to Giuliani's speech, a woman saw the crowd assembling and walked over and asked, "Is this about the dead birds?" The next day, Dr. Fine answered a call on the public outreach line. What about these dead birds? Most authorities to whom Fine and Layton relayed these questions assumed the outbreak in birds and humans to be a coincidence. After all, SLE did not cause disease in birds. But Dr. McNamara in the Bronx Zoo saw no coincidence when she heard of the human cases. Her birds were dying of encephalitis, and interestingly, it was the New World birds that were getting sick. Old World birds were not getting ill. She opined that an Old World pathogen was causing encephalitis in both humans and birds. When eventually she got interest from an individual at USAMRIID, the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, others, like the CDC, thought it was time to take a listen to the veterinarian pathologist, and they wished they had done so sooner. Finally, by mid-September, work gets done on viruses previously isolated from dead birds. Dwayne Gubler, who runs the CDC facility at Fort Collins, identified the virus as either West Nile virus or a West Nile-like virus. And he tells Leighton and Fine that he's converted to McNamara's theory that the avian and the human outbreaks are caused by the same virus. This solves a problem for Fine and Leighton. Patients testing positive for SLE via IFA or ELISA, which are antibody tests, are getting inconclusive or negative results using PCR, the polymerase chain reaction. Now, the polymerase chain reaction is a much more specific assay, but the patients do test positive for West Nile virus using PCR. So they learned the real cause of the outbreak in both humans and birds was West Nile virus, a flavivirus and close relative of SLE. The antibodies in the IFA and ELISA assays simply cross-reacted with antigens in SLE. This cross-reaction led to false positives when New York State and CDC originally tested patients for SLE. But where did the virus come from? From tissues of a dead Bronx Zoo flamingo. Gubler acquired DNA sequence which he shares with Vincent Dubel. Dr. Dubel is of the Pasteur Institute, and he has a private sequence for West Nile virus, one that he can't share publicly because it comes from a goose that he smuggled out of Israel. Dubel tells Gubler that the match is 99% between his flamingo and the Israeli goose. The leading idea is that an infected person or infected mosquito boarded a plane in Israel to New York City and carried the virus along. While humans are generally considered a dead-end host, it is possible that an individual viremic enough with West Nile virus could infect a mosquito, which could then infect a bird and get the whole cycle started. But that would be a pretty darn sick person, and we don't have record of such a person coming in from Israel that has West Nile virus. So my money is on a mosquito that took a flight. So what about all the efforts that New York City took? Were they all in vain? Were they a waste of time and money? Well, no. While the city thought they were fighting SLE, the spraying they performed and the advice they gave to the public would be equally effective against West Nile virus, since the two viruses are spread by the same Culex mosquito. Now, the efforts that New York City was taking and the advice they gave to people was really to protect them from the mosquitoes, which were the vectors for the virus. The treatments were not West Nile virus specific. They were mosquito specific. During the 1999-2000 winter, epidemiologists surveyed the public to see how many people had been infected. They found that for every person that developed serious disease, another 150 had antibodies to West Nile virus but experienced no symptoms. So over that summer, as many as 9,000 New Yorkers might have been infected. The study showed that while West Nile virus can cause serious disease and even death, it is largely the elderly and those with compromised immune systems that are most at risk.